Yo, that almost sounds like a drug problem, right? Like, like in high school, somebody was like, yo, Nick, esports? And you're like, what's esports?
The fans of the games and the teams, they're living this. And people at the orgs, employees, are living this. It can't be ignored. So they're forced to do something and talk on something that they weren't prepared to do.
No. Piccolo was black because of the turban and the cape. And it wasn't in the attitude.
So he's like Vishon? He's like Vishon?
It was definitely an attitude for me.
He was a 5%er.
His attitude.
Yeah, he was a 5%er. He was talking about the sun, the moon, and the star, and call it that. Well, God, that was Piccolo. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that TSM has a responsibility to go and talk to Comcast and fix internet prices. No, but what you can do is you can make yourself visible as a brand to black kids. And that's what I'm not seeing a lot of. And that's the part that's disappointing.
Welcome to the Black Esports Forum, where black industry professionals and black community leaders get together to talk about the state of blackness in the industry, what it's like when it comes to diversity and inclusion, and actually just be really honest. 28 days can't hold the amount of blackness that'll be on this show. Today, we're going to talk about how we got hooked on esports, how we really felt about all those solidarity statements made during the Black Lives Matter movement over the summer, and we're going to talk about what it felt like when we realized that we were the only black people in the room. I'm your host, Amanda Stevens, Diversity and Inclusion Manager at Enthusiast Gaming and contributor for Upcomer, and today I have a really great panel of guests, starting with Nick.
Hey, I'm Nick. I'm a staff writer at Upcomer. I write about League of Legends, Pokemon, other various esports, and black issues as well happening in the industry.
Yo, Norris, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, Norris Howard here from Checkpoint XP. I am the head of collegiate content, which essentially means if you hear about anything going on with college esports, it had to go past my desk. And I'm also host of Checkpoint Daily and one of the founding members of the brand.
Awesome. And Brandon, why don't you bring it home?
Hey, I'm Brandon Brathwaite. I am a programming lead with 1337 Entertainment, also Lead Entertainment if you want to be geeky about it. My job specifically is working with a lot of different social media brands that the company is creating to kind of curate different gaming and esports experiences across TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, all the social medias that you want to be on.
All right. So let's get it started with that first topic that I brought up. We're going to talk about how we got hooked on esports. So Nick, start us off. What got you hooked on esports?
So this is kind of funny. So y'all might clown on me because you know about like fighting games and stuff, but in terms of esports, I would say that like League really was my first one. And so back in 2012, I remember it was just like me and my few friends that played at the cafeteria in high school, and we were watching season 2 Worlds in the cafeteria on a laptop, like in public, like everyone watching, and we're just like crowding around geeking out, and nobody knew what we were geeking out about. And eventually, as it went on, I think it was some game. It was like I know Zubu was playing, and it was like as the game got more and more hype, like the entire cafeteria started crowding around this laptop they had no idea what they were watching, and it's just like everyone's yelling at the screen, and eventually there's a bunch of people who don't even know what's happening. And I was like, dang, this is actually really hype. And from there, that's when I started like really following like pro League and getting more into esports, like understanding that it's even like a thing like that. And from there, it was just like everything I did. Like I'm like skipping class in college to watch like Worlds and like watch games. I'm like eventually, obviously, I decided to just like pack up my desk at my day job and just like give it a shot working there for real. And now I'm here on this show with y'all, and I don't know what happened.
Yo, that almost sounds like a drug problem, right? Like, like in high school, somebody was like, yo, Nick, esports? And you're like, what's esports?
Yeah.
And then you stopped going to class, and then it took over your life so much you're not showing up to work anymore. I don't know, man. Like, when I said hooked on esports, I didn't mean like this needed to be the Nick intervention show. I meant like when
Nick,
it become...
your addiction to esports has affected me in the following way.
at least a hard game to sell too, because the art looked so bad back then. It took me like 2 weeks to get on it with my friends too, because you're just like, what is this? And if you don't know what a MOBA is too, you're like, I can't even make my own character. It's like, what? I gotta pick one of these.
Yo, Norris, I see you got I see you got some Street Fighter art in the background. I see a Mega Man. So I'm guessing you either started with like Smash or like Street Fighter. Like, how'd you get hooked on esports?
Absolutely. I grew up a Capcom stan, so pretty much everything they make, I love, including Street Fighter. And it's funny because my sort of introduction to esports was at a very introductory, like local level, where I'm old enough, and you know, I'm an old head as far as esports is concerned for a lot of people, but I was old enough to play a lot of fighting games in the arcades face to face, where if you were too good, like, you could get beat up.
People might throw some hands.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would be lying to say, you know, if I didn't do my fair amount of shit talking on the Alpha 2 machine. I'm just being honest. But that was sort of my introduction to it, and understanding that people at that level already were playing like money matches. And this is in the early mid 90s. So people were playing money matches. People were having crowds gather, and we had an arcade here. I grew up in Detroit, and we had an arcade in the suburbs here that was like the only Capcom versus SNK 2 machine in the state. And so that's like the one fighting game that I took the time to actually be really, really good at. And I took a lot of people's money. And so I understood that there was something there. And then once I got into, you know, watching things online a little bit later in the 2000s and being able to watch stuff like, you know, Evo and other things, it was just, my mind was already blown. So I already knew this was a big thing, and that led to StarCraft and League and Call of Duty and so many other things. I just kind of addicted to that competitive element and watching that aspect of esports, and I've been here working on it for a few years now. So
a much healthier relationship with esports than Nick. Brandon.
Well, no, gambling.
All right. Shoot. Brandon, what about you? Is it pure degeneracy too?
No pure degeneracy here. It's, for me, it's kind of, as I'm hearing kind of Norris talk about his upbringings, I think I would have been on that path maybe if I didn't only play in like the bodegas and like the laundromats. Like if I actually went out to look for competition, I probably would have went that path. But I still definitely had a love for fighting games. You know, as I said, you know, I played in laundromats, played in bodegas, you know, with local people around my neighborhood and whatnot. But I think the genesis of kind of me getting into esports in general was when I first saw, I believe it was either 2009 or 2010. It was Justin Wong versus Daigo. This was one of the first like big matches for Street Fighter 4, and for me, I immediately thought like back to my days playing in the laundromats and bodegas, but then I kind of like had a epiphany. It's like, wow, like people are playing these games at like kind of tournament, like big stage level. And just to see them play at the level that they were playing, I was just like, I was hooked. Like after that, I watched every Evo. Eventually, I got into League of Legends myself. Bad decision on my part. And eventually, I just decided, you know what? Let me go full all in into esports and start to discover more of what this industry has to offer. But yeah, definitely for me, the genesis was Evo 2009, 2010, that Daigo versus Justin match. I think that's a classic. I think that's entry point for a lot of people, even though a lot of people think their entry point is the Daigo Parry. I think the real entry point is probably there.
You know, that's funny because like when you started to say the Daigo Justin Wong moment, I was like, oh no, I'm gonna have to make up some like event in my life to be like, this is the genesis of esports for me. But I remember the Daigo Parry being that thing where I was like, because like sort of like Norris, I was like playing at like Fuddruckers, like that was our arcade because I'm from Long Island. We didn't have like, you know, like a arcade, and so, you know, I would take people's money and like Marvel superheroes, and I would take people's money in like Soul Calibur. But I think I was like some like nerd camp, and somebody showed me the Daigo Parry, and I was just like, you can do what? You can?
Yeah.
Yes, you can.
What? And then like
Yeah, and it's
it just blew my mind.
You know what's so ill about that? You know what's so ill about that is that if you were somebody who even played half of a match of Street Fighter 3, you go, I can't do that.
Yeah.
You just go, I can't.
What was like super wild for me is that like that was like when I started to like really start like no-lifing fighting games. I like wanted to be really, really good every time I saw people. I would never go to a machine I was good at. I was like, yo, somebody's on like the third strike machine. Bet I'm gonna take this machine from him. But it wasn't until I got to college and somebody had showed me, I was really into Marvel vs. Capcom and I was playing 3 at the time. And somebody showed me like a Marlon, somebody had like seen me play it in my dorm room. It was like, oh, you know who Marlon Pie is, right? And I was like, who? And he was like, Marlon Pie. And I was like, nah, I don't, because I was playing Armor Tarasu at the time. And he's like, no, you need to see this guy. And I remember having the same moment where I was like, yo, I'm not playing the same video game. I'm just not. Yeah. People are doing these air combos, tagging people in, resets. I was like, what's a Seismo? What's Scoops Haagen-Dazs? What is going on? Like, I don't know any of this. And I was just so hooked. And again, you know, you're in college, you're looking for any excuse not to do your assignments. So I'm like, yo, who's Marlon Pie? All right, Marlon Pie's ill. Yo, screw this Chris G guy. You know, with his lame ass team. Soul Fist. Get that shit out of here. And then the nail in the coffin. Somebody had me watch season 3 Worlds with them, and I was like, well, first they showed me some Cloud9 videos, and they're like, this is the Great White Hope, and I was like, yeah, but they're all Asian. And he was like, no, they're the Great White Hope, and I was like, all right, cool. And like they're beating people in like 20 minutes, and I'm like, wow, this looks embarrassing. Are you sure we're like a real region if like teams are just losing in like 18 minutes all the time? And they're like, no. And then we got Rafflecoptered, and I was like, oh, but then, you know, there was this SKT team. I think all of you have heard of them. They got like this guy named Faker on it. And I just remember being, again, like, yo, this is a completely different game. But unlike fighting games where like you gotta have hands, right? At least when I'm watching League, it felt like a sport. It felt like when I was like really into soccer, and even though I didn't know how to like play as well as like, you know, Zinedine Zidane or like Michael Ballack, at least I like knew the strategy of the game, and I understand. Like that's when I like really got hooked, when like my sports loving brain from like high school clicked with the League of Legends brain. I was like, yo, give me that dopamine fix. Give me that.
Yo, that's crazy, Amanda, because that's the exact parallel I drew watching when I first started watching like the LCS, right? Because I came in the league like very late. It was a game that I just had no time for. I played a little bit in like, you know, like 2013, 2014. And I was like, I don't have no time for this. I work 4 jobs and an internship. I don't have time to play League of Legends, right? But I was playing, and also I was playing a lot of MMOs. That was also why I didn't have time. It wasn't the jobs. I was playing MMOs. But the point is that when I start really getting deep into soccer at the same time, I was watching more League, and I'm going, this is amazing, because certain players in League, you can see them have that sort of that vision where a play begins to unfold in front of you and a team fight begins to unfold in front of you, and you go, I know exactly how this team fight is about to go. I know it. I know Double F is about to hit this W. He's about to fly in the back line with Kaiser. He's about to take down the support and take down the AD carry, and the rest of it is they're gonna throw at Baron at 35. Like that, you just know it.
Yeah, and I think so soccer is like the best analogy. Like I've heard a lot of people try to sometimes say like football or basketball because there can be very kinetic games, but I think that soccer is like the best analogy, because soccer can just be like nothing going on for like a minute, and not in the way that like baseball is nothing going on until like somebody hits like a really good ball. Like soccer could just be passing, right? And that's like farming. And then like all of a sudden somebody hits the ill cross, somebody blows past the defender,
and then bam, the game's blown open.
Yeah, so I feel that.
It's funny y'all.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant.
It's funny y'all say that about sports, because for me, I hated sports. One of my best friends growing up, since we were like kindergarten, he loved them, and I never understood it. Like, it's not even like, oh, I don't like it. I don't like going outside. I couldn't even understand it. I was like, I tried to understand football. I was like, what? Like, I don't understand. And then like with League, I felt like like without even being able to make those comparisons, I felt it for myself. You know, I was like, oh, this is like my thing. Like this is, you know, I get hype about this. I'm like, I see what they're on about with the other stuff now. You know, like that's kind of how it was for me.
Yo, Brandon, you've been
absolutely.
You've been a little quiet. You got like, were you sport? Were you a sporter like me and Norris, or are you more the like traditional geek like Nick?
Yeah, it's crazy because like, to be honest, until I started working in the industry, I don't think I ever even like made the connection with sports, right? Like I always had the connection of like these are people playing video games at a high level, but I never thought of it as like sports. Like I was a big, you know, basketball fan, still a big basketball fan, still a Packers fan to this day. And yeah, I just never maybe made the connection. Maybe it's because my start was kind of more following like the Evos of the world and like really just following more just solo players until I got into like League of Legends heavily because of my job. Like I just never made the connection that this was sport until I got into the industry. It was more just like these are players who are dope and playing at a high level. I just never saw it as sport until I got in.
I do also find the conversation interesting, especially when we talk about esports, and especially to me as some, you know, as a black content creator and thinking about black sports, and I especially think of the FGC and I think of boxing, and we look at the legacy of boxing and how many great black boxers that there have been, and then you just see how many black and brown people also dominate the FGC. That's sort of the you know, athletic comparison that I make to the FGC, and in many ways that I view as foundational to esports. In many ways I view boxing as foundational to sort of the sports sort of entertainment complex that we have now, where you focus a lot on these personalities, you focus a lot on these sort of like pseudo stories that people fabricate kind of out of nothing, in the same way that people do in boxing a lot of times, or in the FGC a lot of times. I just also found that very interesting that, you know, a sport in which many black and brown people participate in, mostly because it's the cheapest. Also, you have black and brown participation in the FGC, mostly because it's the cheapest.
You know, it's funny that you said the word exploitative, because when I think about, you know, all of those BLM statements that were kind of made over the summer, that kind of word sort of echoed in my head, because every time I would see a team say, you know, they were committed to Black Lives Matter, that they were committed to the fight against racial injustice, committed to racial equity, it was a lot of teams that didn't have a lot of black people. And like, let's pretend for a second that, you know, we'll give everybody the benefit of the doubt as to like why there aren't a lot of black people in like League of Legends or like CSGO. But we're talking about like some of the very first orgs were Overwatch teams that like had, I think there was one black person in all of the Overwatch League, and he was on the Gongsu Charge.
Kodak.
No, oh right, two, Kodak. So there was there was the
Kodak
guy,
and you had Snow.
Yeah.
Yes,
so
Snow was the guy,
right?
I know.
Yeah, and then you're looking at like the League of Legends teams are starting to make, you know, their announcements, but there's not a lot of people in those orgs. Like, let's just talk about like straight up facts. Like, across a lot of orgs last summer, there was not a lot of visible black people, whether it was player, influencer, coach, owner. And so when all of these teams made their statements, I was like, yo, y'all gotta stop. I am so tired of seeing these black background, white text, social media statements from orgs that I know don't want to work with black people. Right? Like, let's be real. Like, some of these orgs legit don't want to work with black people.
It was interesting to see that, and obviously, you know, it was even larger than just esports. This was happening in many industries where you would see that stuff. But I think as it pertains to esports and why that was particularly heinous is, in my opinion, these organizations can be a part of the immediate remedy to some of the issues that we see as it pertains to why you don't see the level of participation of black people in the esport, right? We all know that to play most high-level esports, you have to have two things: a medium-grade PC and some decent internet. Okay, well, in most black and brown neighborhoods, both of those things are cost prohibitive. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that TSM has a responsibility to go and talk to Comcast and fix internet prices. No. But what you can do is you can make yourself visible as a brand to black kids. And that's what I'm not seeing a lot of. And that's the part that's disappointing, is that, you know, TSM will have somebody like Myth and push them to the forefront of so much stuff. And I actually think that was a pretty intelligent thing for them to do. But I don't see that across the board. I don't see, you know, people getting at least that level of push in the same way that Myth got. And I think that's very important for kids to be able to see themselves at a participatory level at esports at the highest level, even if it is just a streamer. I think that was a major issue. And that, to be honest, costs little to nothing to these orgs to give them a social push, to say, go to this person's stream, to say, here's a content creator that we think is awesome. It costs them nothing. Most of them are already on the payroll for them. So, you know, I just felt like that was a part of it, you know, not seeing immediately, hey, we can remedy the issue. By the way, here's somebody you could go and support if you want to support a black creator. I didn't see that, and I thought that that was very upsetting from a lot of these teams. So
it's interesting that you brought up the thing about like the internet access, right? Because I'm kind of like, this is something that I've kind of been working on some research around. 100 Thieves last year, they actually paired with an organization to raise money to give internet to people that didn't have it in Detroit, actually. And just
they worked on it with Dan Gilbert, Rocket.
Yeah, it was Connect 313, I think it was called.
Yep.
And I think that they didn't fix like ISP throttling and access issues in Detroit for every citizen of Detroit that needs it, right? But they, like, even something like that sets a precedent, not only that they are doing something and they're interested in the cause, but it shows a higher level of understanding of, just as you said, these orgs can actually get ahead of this issue in a much more meaningful way by going to where the people are, going to where the communities are, and injecting money right there instead of just doing some grand thing in a charity that no one's heard of, or like whatever, you know?
It's wild too that you bring that up, because when they had the LCS finals here in Detroit, I remember like members of actual teams telling me that we had no idea the ping in Detroit was so great. And it was honestly because we had just did a massive internet infrastructure boost to where the stadium is and in the surrounding areas. And so when you talk about stuff like that, and you talk about being able, and by the way, this is also another reason as to why America as a whole just performs like crap at Worlds, is because we're kneecapping our potential talent by not having good internet in most parts of the country. So it's one of those things where the teams, in my opinion, have the cultural cachet now to do the programs, Nick, that you just brought up. They could go do it.
I will also just say that I think that a big thing that we saw over the summer happened because obviously, look, it's March now, and I didn't hear. I think that I made some tweet that I think did a lot more, covered a lot more ground than a lot of esports orgs did. But I think what we saw was people tiptoeing around something because they were forced to have the discussion, because guess what? People were hurting. People were murdered. And I live in Richmond. I live Monument Avenue, all that stuff, that is around the corner. I could see it right now if I tried. Like, you know, the fans of the games and the teams, they're living this. And people at the orgs, employees, are living this. It can't be ignored. So they're forced to do something and talk on something that they weren't prepared to do. And why weren't they prepared to do that? Because they only do it when it's the February, so they didn't even do that this year, or when something huge happens. you know, because they weren't ever putting in the work before when it really mattered and they had to step up. The only thing they could do was put the empty promises, run their mouths, do whatever they needed to do, looked good, try hard not to be the org that didn't say something, and yeah.
Yeah, I want to add to that too. For me, the big idea about a lot of the performative stuff you see like online and how people kind of, I wouldn't say insert themselves into causes, but just kind of find a way to be like, all right, we need to have a response, let's respond, and then let's end the issue there. I think a lot of that just contributes to the kind of idea of not being forward thinking about certain things and forward thinking about how you should approach this problem, right? Like, you understand that there's a problem there, actually put in the effort to fix it. So for me, I feel like, take for example the Overwatch League, right? The Overwatch League has all these city-based teams and these, you know, regions and things like that, but when you really talk to a lot of the Overwatch fans, their on-the-ground presence is abysmal, right? Like, a lot of these teams, with the exception, I mean, I'm in New York, so I'm like thinking a little bit more that I know because I'm in the area, but the New York Deadly Venoms, if you like look at the makeup of the fans there, multicultural. And it's not just because we're in New York, it's just the idea that there's a space for people to even be fans of. Like, this is like kind of like more of a, you know, fan base organization, but they did still have some backing of the New York NYXL in, you know, terms of merch and actually bringing, you know, them spaces to kind of, you know, celebrate their fandom. But a lot of that can be done on a ground level with teams that aren't just have like a city next to their name. Like 100 Thieves could, not 100 Thieves, but I'll take an East Coast based like esports org if they ever come here, but like they could connect with, you know, OS Studio, they could connect with I mean,
you got Endemic, which aren't they like technically like based in New York?
Well,
isn't Mike like in the tri-state?
Yeah, Andbox is kind of like the New York version of, yeah. But they're just like a subset of like NYXL. They're just like, all right, Andbox, NYXL. But yeah, they can make those connections with these already established like places where, you know, black and brown and, you know, all kind of people of all kinds of life meet to kind of share their fandom about gaming and like do initiatives there. That there definitely needs to be, in my opinion, more of a boots on the ground approach to building up the bases in a lot of these esports orgs, and I feel like they don't either understand that or don't care to kind of make that happen.
I agree.
Or they don't
wholeheartedly.
Or they don't do enough. Like, for example, CLG is partnered with MSG now, right? And at the start of that first season that they were partnered with MSG, they linked up with NYC LOL, which is, you know, one of New York City's biggest like League of Legends group. They do League of Libations, which is like, you know, going to a bar, watching LCS together.
Shout out to Jet Set.
That's a very
shout out to Jet Set, you know.
Yeah, Jet Set, you know, gotta give her flowers. And the thing is like, that's a very diverse bunch. You're seeing all different people of all different walks, different ages. And CLG partnered with like the first one, and you could have won like CLG swag, and Hotshot was there. And I was like, yo, Jet Set, this is lit. Is this going to happen all the time? And they're like, nah, you know, they want to make sure that they do the first match. And I was like, how hard is it to just make an MSG liaison position for League of Libations and just do a regular, just like power their events every week? Like, it's 18 weeks out of the year, right? Just, they're not going to Worlds. They're not going to MSI. You only got to worry about like 18, 20 weeks. Just like, yo, hats. Yo, New Yorkers, we love hats. Like, make like an actual CLG fitted. And I guarantee you, even the Cloud9 TSM fans would be like, yo, but we got to fit it, like an actual fitted though. Right? Like, it just...
No, it's true.
It just blows my mind just like how short-sighted a lot of these activations are. Or I'll even talk from like the consultant perspective. When I actually was able to get in front of some of these teams, I was like, you know how you guys can create like generational differences besides, you know, doing that like big bail fund or picking the Trevor project or, you know, some charity. I was like, have y'all ever heard of Snoop Dogg's Football League? And they're all like, no. I'm like, well, go watch the Netflix series. Snoop Dogg pays for these kids to be able to play football. And like, I'm not saying y'all got Snoop Dogg money. Like, let's be real, y'all don't. But you're all in LA. Y'all all can't each pick like a youth center, buy them buy them like 7 computers.
Shit, all y'all got like Alienware and
just
then
do
this
a
computer
league
and that computer.
Like, y'all can't just like do a youth center league like that. I'm sorry, there's no way y'all can't do that.
You can supply those with like Alienware dead stock that you just get.
Yep.
You just like don't use anymore.
Last year's LCS computers.
Or you reach out to Riot. There's definitely dead computers at Riot, right? That they just like don't use anymore. And so like these orgs, they like kind of get it a little bit, right? They know how to like make the tweet. They know how to like donate to a bail fund after the bail fund says they don't want any more money. But when it comes to like generational differences, and I'm not just gonna say it's just the LCS, but like when like Riot talks about how they want LCS to be professional, right? That's why they wore the suits for so long, because they wanted it to feel like a traditional sports broadcast. Like, you do know that like every sports league in the US, like it's mandatory to do like community outreach, right?
NBA cares, baby.
NBA cares. Yo, I was lucky. I got to play soccer with like Rough Riders and Metro Stars when I was a kid, because like they had to fulfill outreach, so they came to my soccer camp. And I got to learn how to like shoot from one of the strikers on the Metro Stars. And like then of course, you know, the whole like don't do drugs shit and all that whatever. But like, yo, that hooked me on soccer for another 4 years. Getting to play with Metro Stars for 2 summers made sure I played soccer in high school.
And that's the really low-hanging fruit stuff, right? We're not even talking about anything that can, you know, be set up, you know, to time immemorial, right? I'm talking about stuff that you could do over the course of 2 years, right? And I think the biggest thing, you know, talking about what was actionable, I also think at a very fundamental level, we also as consumers have to not just get mad and say like all they did was post a box and then go back to doing the same shit that we was doing before. And I'm not trying to be the whole respectability politics Negro, that's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that I hate the way EA makes FIFA. I didn't buy this year's FIFA. I'm not gonna buy next year's FIFA. I have it because it was gifted to me. But I'm not going to spend any more on a game that I disagree wholeheartedly with how you make it. I think if people are more willing to say, you know what, up until this is done, I'm not going to give you more of my money. I'm just simply not going to. Now I understand why that's hard for a professional, but 99.9% of the people that those tweets are made for are not professionals who depend on the game for their livelihood. So the way I view it is, if we want to continue to hold some of these companies to the things that they say, and we really want substantive change in terms of gaming, I think folks like us need to continue to have these conversations. But as a whole, as a community, we got to be willing to say, you won't get our money. And at the end of the day, that's all anybody really listens to.
And I will say that I think that's a really great point. I mean, one thing, Amanda, we've talked about this. For me, there's so much frustration because I think a lot of people, it's exactly as you said, you know, the audience for these messages, they're not only are they not professionals, a lot of them maybe have never even had a job, you know, or they've never even interacted with the world around them in a way where their actions have consequences, you know. And for me, I had to come to terms. I was just frustrated and appalled for a lot of time, and I had to come to terms with like, look, as something I need to do more this year because I was upset about what happened last summer. I have to start using my like platform, my space, and just like talk about it. Keep the conversation going, even when no one else is, even though other people should be. It's annoying, it's taxing, it's draining. We deal with so much already. And it's interesting with, you know, kind of like voting with your dollar with League too, because I think it's kind of like people are able to like watch LCS for free, right? And I wonder, like, what does that look like an LCS strike or something? Like, like, you know, people, like an organized, we are not watching LCS this month. or something, and like when you see like what the viewership numbers would look like if something like that were to happen, like I don't know how much of a ripple it would have. I will say viewership numbers aren't looking that great this year comparatively, so maybe it wouldn't have had the difference if we had come up with that one a little earlier. But,
well, it's there's enough black folks doing everything to make people notice, and that's something in America that I've had to realize myself, because when you hear like, oh, we're 12-13% of the population, whatever, and then sure, maybe 16 if you throw in, you know, mixed race folks. Okay, 16% of the population, that sounds so low. But when you think about it, that's still millions and millions of people. And if millions and millions of people do anything, anywhere, people have to pay attention. And I think for the millions of black people that play video games, when we're truly upset about something, then we need to say, yo, no. So I think as a community, because I'm all about what can I fix right now, today, that's what we can do.
Yeah, I think before we like kind of move along, is that I think a lot of times there's this like sentiment that I see on Twitter and social media of like, oh, so what do you want to do? Just like hire a bunch of black people, like meritocracy and stuff? And it's like, well, yes, actually, I do want you to like hire a bunch of black people. There's a reason why there's like a gap in STEM fields and entertainment fields and esports. It's like where they're looking for hires, and you know, got to give propers to, you know, the folks over at Community establishing the HBCU esports league, and Evil Geniuses working with them. I know Play Versus is also trying to get an HBCU thing off the ground themselves. So like there are people doing that work, but like we're not just talking about like hiring people. Like that's not the be all and end all. And because I'm a diversity and inclusion consultant, I think I get a little bit more targeted feedback than some of y'all probably get. And it's like, I think that like the mark is missed. It's not hard to do a youth league. It's not hard to do a mentorship program. You know, Cloud9 did their summer camp thing, and yeah, it costs money, but like, and I know that it's like a revenue avenue, but like, why can't LCS do a summer camp program and it's like for inner city kids, right? Like these things aren't as hard as people make them out to be, and the only reason they're hard is because like we pretend that like Riot's still a small company without like daddy Tencent money, or like Blizzard's got no money, or like any of these orgs don't have money, and people are always like, well, oh, it's gonna cost a lot. It's like, yes, do you think that it like doesn't cost the NBA like money to do these programs? Do you think it like all right, fine, y'all want to say the NBA has a ton of money? MLS figures that shit out. Like, yeah, come on, fam. Like, and it's
as a league,
as a league, like they probably like there are people in the MLS getting paid less than League of Legends players. So like, it's figure outable. Women's leagues figure this shit out, and they get paid way less than an esports athlete. So it's just like crazy to me that everybody tries to make it about money, or, oh, how do we devote the resources? It's like, well, then you're proving the point that you like don't actually care about these communities. Because if you cared about these communities and you really wanted to reach out to them, it wouldn't be a resource problem. It wouldn't be a money problem. It would be a planning problem. And then that's just about getting some more folks in, or, you know, linking up with community, linking up with youth centers, like, you know, reaching out to activists. Like, if you can't figure it out, like, what do, right? Like, you want to have a really good broadcast, you want to hire somebody like Ariel Horn, right? You want to have a good youth program, you hire somebody, right? Like, it's not, it's just,
yeah.
Maybe my head is really in the clouds about it. Maybe it's just like, maybe I'm too on the ground, and so I can't like, you know, Superman up into the sky and look down and like get the big picture. But as someone who's worked with nonprofits, it's just insane to me that these for-profit companies with like billions of dollars make it seem like it's impossible to like move an inch. We're not asking you to fix the problem this year. I don't think anybody here on this panel today thought that like the industry would like 180, right? In 8 months. Yeah. So like, we're not asking you to like lift Mount Everest. We're asking you to like park the car a block down the street.
That's it. That's it.
And so I don't know if anyone to get something in, but I will say that something that I see that's just so glaringly clear is that we just kind of got comfortable with the way in which like teams were doing these things. So when you look and see how many college like career fairs and stuff there are at like UCI, UC Berkeley, and things like that, and I say this all the time, but like generally speaking, if you're going to a school like that, you're probably not going to benefit as much from something like that as somebody else might. And to me, it's just like this. I would have to assume it's willful at this point. This like willful ignorance of just
privilege begets more.
Exactly.
Privilege. Like that's the whole thing of it. Is that yes, obviously, if you go to UC Berkeley or Irvine or anything like that, yep, you're gonna have a full and awesome and robust esports program because at some point somebody who went to that school built a esports program to build upon, or someone was exposed to it, or you had a graduate who then ended up becoming a programmer for Riot. Something happened somewhere, and that's the way it happens. And the reason why you're not seeing it happen in the inner cities is because those people are not being afforded those opportunities. You're not seeing a lot of people from Brooklyn or Gary, Indiana, or St. Louis that are being involved at the university level with the creation of some of these things, who aren't getting love from somebody who's already done it. And so when you talk about how the West Coast, and by me covering collegiate, it's something I'm very aware of. But when you talk about the West Coast and then you talk about other parts of the country, everybody thinks the esports lives on the West Coast. Oh, everything is in California. That's where everything is located. Meanwhile, at the collegiate level, it is dominated by cold weather.
It's like Midwest and South schools, right? Like some of the best esports programs are in the South and the Midwest.
The Big East, baby.
It's dominated. Yeah, it's dominated by Midwestern schools and Texas schools. That's it. There's the West Coast is not even in the conversation. And why is that? Because this is as far as most of those kids will get. And so they play like that is as far as they will get. And that's why you're starting to see Maryville and Harrisburg and other of those types of schools get so much talent, because the kids are playing knowing that this is as high as I might go. Because I'm not in California.
Especially with like a school like Maryville, they like see that there's a small pipeline, right? Like Clerky used to be, a team owner. He still is a team owner for E United, but I don't think it's not the same thing, right? But like there have been a ton of Maryville cats that have got into amateur to
two are in the LCS right now.
Two are in the LCS right now. So like I get it. It's just I don't know. I could talk myself in circles about this because I don't know, like I played sports in college, right? I know what it's like to know that you're never gonna do something at like that highest level, but it's not like I didn't think that because like I was black, right? I just knew that like I was not joining the Metro Stars, I guess now the Red Bulls. Jesus, what a terrible name change. But like, I knew I wasn't going to be playing on the Red Bulls, right? There was a certain point in my life, I think I got to like 10th grade and I was like, I might play like 1 year college soccer. And then, it's time to put the cleats in the closet. Right? And it's okay. But like, I think what's disheartening is you sincerely both hear it from like people who like troll us, who say like black people aren't interested in esports. But you also hear it from like people, right? You hear it from people like us who are like, yo, that's not for us. Right? Like, the FGC, that's for us, but we can't go over there. Like we can't go to that side of town. And it's like really disheartening that they like literally think there's nothing for them in esports. Like they can be fans, they can watch it, but they honestly believe. And I know that like there are going to be people who watch the show who are going to be preaching to the choir too, and then there are going to be people who are going to watch this to be like, oh man, like they're so wrong. Like, I want you to think about that statement. that there are people who think they can't do a thing. A whole industry that has so many roles, from like accounting to business ops to social media to graphic design. They think that an entire spectrum of jobs is not for them, literally because they're black.
Wait, let's put it in the real perspective, in real terms. A lot of these kids think it's just white people stuff. Like, straight up. Like, if I went out right now and went down my block and told somebody that they could play a computer game on a desktop right now for about $1 million, they would be like, nah, that's not possible. Not because it's outside of the realm of possibility, but because of who they are, they feel like that's not for me. That's not my lane. But
it's a major part of the conversation. I mean,
but definitely, I could talk to probably the same person and they could have hoop dreams. See what I'm saying? Like, they just don't. There's already that mental barrier that's not for me. It's white people stuff, and I can't. I'm not gonna be able to break that barrier. You know.
And I think the last thing I'm saying is just, it's even by extension, even when you see like gentrification happen in certain neighborhoods, or you go to certain cities, or you go to certain areas of town, and I'm not sure about y'all, but where I grew up, there are very regimented pockets of the metro area where it was like, yo, they do not want us there. And there's no like physical barrier that stops you from going into that town. There's no, force field that stops you from entering, but there's a mental thing that says they don't want us there. And so I'm not gonna waste my time going to discover anything there. And I think by sort of extension, Brandon, that's kind of what you're talking about, and Amanda, you as well. And that only happens because they don't see enough of us doing it. And so outside of it being this willful thing of like, we don't want black people here, it's at the very bare minimum something that is at least willfully ignored. And that's the problem that I see, is because everybody now it's the wave to acknowledge all this income inequality. It's the wave to acknowledge all this other stuff, and to say we got to say what it is before we fix it. And that's true, but I'm hearing a lot of saying and not enough fixing. And Amanda, I'm right there with you. Before I was in esports, I worked in the nonprofit world, and I was able to start up a esports program. Now, I don't know the future of it now that I've left. I followed up with it, different people there, long story. But I was able to start up a rudimentary esports program with no training, with no requirements in the game, with a basic, with a grant program that I was able to write something for. It took me 3 months, me by myself, literally 3 months, and $30,000. But that's nothing.
Yeah, and that's why it's like a little crazy to me as I'm ready to move on, is that I don't think people realize that like we have trained ourselves in a sense to think that like esports is this like super grandiose thing that like needs all of these bells and whistles, but it doesn't. Like, how do you play soccer, right? You need a marker to like show for a goal. You need a couple of buddies, and you need a ball, right? Like, you can do an esports program with a handful of computers and kids that just want to play a game, that want to figure out what that is. Whether it's Fortnite, whether it's Apex Legends, Valorant, League, like, you don't, like, it doesn't have to be the LCS. We're not saying we need to make a Negro League, right? That'd
be dope, though.
That's not what we're asking for.
That'd be dope, though.
Wait.
Look, man, I'm ready for my Negro League esports shirts I can rock for like 1 year, and then people be like,
actually,
my throwback
the Negro League LCS jerseys that they only wear the first week of June.
Yo, no, I see it now. The first merch for the show is gonna be Negro League esports jerseys.
Let's do it.
The best merch I did. I'm wearing it instantly.
People be like, "Damn, there was a Negro League in esports." Yeah, started this year.
Yeah. Back in the 80s.
Back in January.
Right, Pac-Man? Back in the 80s, where all we played was Missile Command.
Missile Command and Palm.
I feel like this is where Nick wants to leave. Yo, it can't be
Oh,
all
man.
serious
Yo,
all the
yo.
time. You gotta laugh.
That's right.
sometimes.
Oh, for sure.
Yo, I'm just picturing it now. We put some great black video game characters like Master Yi,
Master Yi.
Piccolo.
Oh boy. You know that should be a segment. Like,
Jax.
what League of Legends
Jax.
character is
Jax.
black?
Piccolo.
Piccolo.
Yeah, Piccolo.
What characters out there?
Yo, cause y'all know you do that, right? I remember when I first started playing League, I was like, yo, where's all the black? Cause I was playing before Lucian came out. Like Lucian was a new champion, and some people tried to be like, yo, Karma's black, and I was like, she's tan. She's not.
For
not
me,
black.
she
Are
was
you
black.
lying to
For
me?
me, she was black.
Huh?
For me, she was black.
Is she?
She was black enough, blackish.
So now this is a new topic. Which league characters count as black?
No, but like before we get
Jax,
super off the rails,
Yi.
I remember people being like, Yi and Jax are black, and I was like, why? They're like, because you can't see their faces, and I was like, yo, let's not anime this shit. Let's not pick like the most human, otherworldly thing and be like, yo, it's obviously black. Like Piccolo, black. Mr. Popo, black.
Oh.
Like let's
No. Piccolo was black because
He
of
was
the
black.
turban and the cape. And it wasn't in the attitude.
For
So
me,
he's like
for me, it was
Vishon?
the attitude.
He's like
It was
Vishon.
definitely
Yeah.
the attitude for me.
He was a
the
5%er.
His attitude.
Yeah, he was a 5%er. He was talking about the sun, the moon, and the star, and calling these guys God. That was Piccolo. Like y'all fronting like this is my headcanon. I thought this was
Nah,
why.
I was always with
I
the
thought this was-
Piccolo just didn't take no nonsense. All these other Saiyans doing all this bullshit,
Yeah.
and it's like Piccolo.
I just
like,
thought
the
Piccolo was
fuck?
your black dad, right?
Oh wow.
Like you were like, yo, can I go to the dojo to chain? Nah, we can go in the woods. but like Goku goes up to Kami's palace. Am I Goku's dad? I mean, Goku's technically my dad, Mr. Piccolo. Not anymore.
Shut up. I go in the woods.
Yo, but let's get let's get back on topic a little bit. Let's get back to the actual segment. The next segment at hand. Norris is detracting me because
Yes,
I
I'm sorry.
detracted his podcast with Final Fantasy 14. So I see what's happening here.
Sabotage.
Yo, Brandon,
Yeah.
when was the first time you realized you were probably the only black person in the room?
So I'm gonna go back into history. So the funny thing with me and a lot of the history that I have with esports is that a lot of the places I worked for were also sports places. So in technicality, I was never the only black person in there. The place where I think I felt most like I was the only black person actually was at events. Like when I went, I think, to the first League of Legends tournament in Madison Square, not the LCS, the first Worlds in yeah. That's where I met. I
2016.
think that's actually where I met you, Amanda. But yeah, like you could see the dichotomy of it, right? Like bunch of white fans, Asian fans, like walking around the place, you know, looking around, you know, having a good time in Madison Square, and then you see like the black ushers, the black people selling condiments. Like I saw like two black people that were just like kind of looking up at like the monitors outside of it, and they were looking up and they were watching the game like intently, like watching it as if it was a sport. That's kind of where, you know, I really started to feel like this is a sport. But like they're watching on the screens, you know, all the white, Asian, you know, it's probably sprinkled in black there too, but like they're in the stadium watching the main event. So it's like, especially for me as someone who was working like press for that event, obviously in the press box, I'm probably the only handful of black people in there. It was me, I think you, Amanda, and like maybe there was one other person shifting around, and it's like me and you are the only people who are actually like journalists there, right?
And at a lot of events too,
right?
Because that was like kind of true for ESL 1 New York, except especially once they stopped doing fighting games.
Yeah, ESL for Counter-Strike events, same thing. So it's like, for me, that's when I really started to see where the divide was, right? Like, there just wasn't enough people that looked like me that were fans. But I could see a lot of the people who were working the actual event as people that look like me. And that's where it was just like, whoa, like, there's something wrong here. And then as, like, kind of like my career, like, moved on a little bit, as I started, like, moving up in the ranks, you start to realize it's like, wait, I'm the only black person that's at this like higher level in this company. Like for example with Cheddar, no, not a knock on them, but out of all the news producers in there, this is out of the whole company, not even just esports. It was me and one other executive producer that were black. One other black woman, me. So it's like, when you start to think about esports in that example, I can't really think of like high level or even mid level black people who are working in this space. So it's like, I can only imagine like what a lot of the decision making kind of looks like, but two, just to the point that we were making before about this idea that it's like, that's just white people stuff. Like that's not stuff that we do, because even just in the anvils of just working at more mid and high level, there's just a super disparity there. But definitely the first place I would say I felt that disparity was that event for sure.
What about you, Norris?
Yeah. It's interesting because as a gamer, I never felt like I was the only black person in the room, because I grew up in Detroit, and that's not possible to be the only black person anywhere in Detroit. But as I started to move more so into the gaming professional space, is where I really started to notice, and that's kind of the part that used to upset me quite a bit, is that because I watched so many fighting games and saw so many black competitors, I would only then assume that most of the people that I would work along with in esports, mostly talking about fighting games starting out, would be black people, and that was not the case, at least not here in the Midwest. So I would go to Big House, or I would go to Frostbite or something like that, and I'm the only black member of the press there to cover it. Or you would start to get in that somebody now who's a head of content, and you start having kind of the higher level conversations, even less so. And definitely not many of us are founders of media brands, of which I am, but not many of us. There's some, but not a lot, and definitely not, in the Midwest. And so I tend to like to regionalize a lot of stuff, simply because I think there are very specific things when you're talking about esports in New York, very specific things we're talking about esports in LA. So in the context of the Midwest, I mean, I'm on an island, dog. Like, it's like 4 of us, like in the whole region, like not just talking Detroit, not just talking Michigan, not just talking, like the whole Midwest. I can probably count on my hands how many esports media professionals there are.
I mean, but how you feel about the Midwest, I think, is how me and Nick feel covering LCS. Like, until I met Brandon, it was just me. And Brandon, you weren't like a league person. You were just like there.
Nah, I was.
No offense, but you weren't.
Yeah, no.
You weren't like I was, where I was like doing interviews all the time and like making a podcast. Right?
No, I was definitely just more of like, I'm esports press in general. Like, I wasn't actually like
the esports beat.
Yeah, I wasn't actually like there for specifically league. Well, I'm there for league, but you know what I'm saying. Like, I'm not there because of league.
So it's like, so how you feel is like definitely conversations I've had with Nick about like being like we laugh a lot, laugh, cry, laugh. Exasperation laugh.
So for me, the thing is, and I mean, like, obviously, back in the day, like Amanda, you used to be covering league as more of like as a main like regular beat, and then you stepped away, and like really you're going to Worlds, and like you pick up where you left off like there, and you'll go to those big events. But in terms of people covering League of Legends like full time, covering LCS like other regions, it's that press Discord, it's me. When I wrote a piece kind of critiquing the LCS like over the summer around like Black Lives Matter. It really took off, and do you know why? Because I was the only person in that press room that literally had the tools to be able to write it. And they gave me everything. They were like, like this is such a great great piece that you did. This is so whatever. And that made me feel like that's when it kind of like really sunk in for me that I was like the only black person in the room, because I realized,
oh, and now you a magical Negro.
yeah, if I don't write this, it literally won't
doesn't
happen. They will just, time will pass. I have to stop and like dig deep, go through the emotional whatever, like all of the cognitive dissonance and like frustration is involved in like writing something like that personal, and I have to write it and show it to the world, because otherwise like there's nothing. Like, who's gonna critique it? Just people like making an angry tweet or something. Mm-hmm. You know, and even for me at my first event, my first in-person event was in Detroit, and actually I walked up and I saw you, Norris. I saw that. I remember walking up because it was in those rafters. It was the weirdest like press room, and I just saw that hair, and I was like, I was
back when I had my hair.
Yeah, it was. I was nervous because it was my first ever time seeing some of these people that had been with online. I'd never been to an event. I had just quit like a full-time job. I drove from Richmond to Detroit 11 hours with like my best friend because we didn't have any money to get it like a plane ticket or something. Like, I had a few $100s in my pocket. I was like, all right, like this has to go perfectly. And I'm walking up the stairs. I'm like, okay, I gotta introduce myself to people. I gotta look, and I just see out of the corner. I'm like, okay. And I just remember like, I put my stuff down with the Checkpoint XP people. I just remember just setting it right there, and I was like, okay.
And I remember deliberately I turned to my people. I was like, yo, make sure he good. he good. He good. But it is. It's that feeling, man. And for me, it was very cool, you know, seeing you and seeing other people at different events. And to be perfectly honest, that's the biggest reason why I miss E3. Like, I could care less about what's shown at E3, because I also cover like gaming as a whole for the Daily Show. But that's why I miss E3, because it's LA, and I go to LA and I get to see all the other black folks in gaming at the time, and it's like, it feels great. Like, I get to go and kick it with Malik. I get to go and kick, you know, I may see Aaron, I may see this person, I may see that person. I mean, and it's just great because we're all,
and that's PAX for me, right? Like, I mean, I like do my, like, I care a lot about my queer identity as well, and so like being able to like spend the whole weekend in the diversity lounge, and just for one weekend to think that like we the only people in the industry, right? Like, that's what's lit. Because when I go to these, if I go to a CS:GO event, I am like a beacon. I might as well like say I'm from Wakanda. Like, let's be real, right? Like, I could. There's nobody for me to do this to. There's nobody unless Brandon's there.
Unless
right?
unless it's in New York. Like, if it's in
New
Barclays,
York,
I'll be
and
there.
then, you know, like, I'll go to like a league event. I remember when I went to Worlds. So like my World situation was super unfortunate. I think Brandon's the only person who's known me this long. So I got kicked off of a flight before I got to Chicago for Worlds in 2016 because I was wearing a Black Panther hat and I was wearing Aesop Rock's
I remember this.
American flag shirt.
Yeah, I remember that.
And so I don't want to tell that story. I'll tell that story on a different episode. But I was like, yo, this is the worst omen to start this trip. Like, I'm in my, I like to present as black as possible when I travel. It's just a thing. I don't know why. It's weird. I know it. But I was like, man, I was all black out, and I got kicked off a plane for it. This is not gonna go well. And then I walk into the press room, and I guess you weren't doing esports back in 2016, Norris, because I was literally the only black person. And I was confused.
You know what? We were doing it, but I don't think we didn't go to Worlds that year.
But I was just so confused because I was like, yo, I'm in Chicago. I was like, maybe there'll be like a black, like regular press dude. Because we've all been at events where like there's like people from like local newspapers or like local TV. And so I was like, yo, there's no way I'm going to be in Chicago. It's going to be okay. I'll be surrounded by black people. Like, it's going to be fine. I'm in that press room. And it's a sea of white, and then and for those of you who have never covered League, for like Worlds, there's also the Chinese media, and it's like 40 of them, and you don't know what outlet they're all from because they don't talk to you, but they all sit together, and so it's like all the white people from like ESPN, and back in the day it was Yahoo Esports and like whatever, all the Asians, me,
yeah,
and I'm like, yo, this can't be. I was my first Evo, I was the only black press at. I went to Evo in 2016. I was like, yo, I'm in Mecca. This surely this is where we'll find all the black people.
I was
Not in the press box.
just about to mention that. Like, think of that, right?
It was so uncomfortable because like you get so beaten down, and like I'm like half black, so like I've had to deal with a lot of like, you know, reclaiming my blackness and spaceness. So you get like a little depressed every time you like go to do work, but you can't do work the same way because I don't know, I like to be around my peoples. And so like when you can't talk about yourself, because I like to chat, I like to get to know the other people in the press. So it was just like really hard at like a regular event. So then to go to Evo where I was like, yo, this is gonna be great. I'm gonna meet other black journalists. This is gonna be lit. This is gonna be the best day ever. I meet a single black journalist. I don't think I met a single black esports journalist at an Evo until like 2018.
Yeah, and that's crazy too, actually, because
At Evo?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, part of it is that like a lot of the black journalists are like, this is not a knock, or like fan journalists. Mm-hmm. So they don't like, they either didn't get a press pass or they don't know about the press room. But that's a whole nother conversation for like a different episode.
Yeah.
But like, it was just all white. Like I think I might have met one guy in 2017, but he was like in there to like be like, all right, this is what the press room looks like, because it was the first time they did one. And he's like, oh, it's just a bunch of table and chairs. All right, I'm out. And like never saw him again the entire event.
Yeah.
Like it's just, I don't like, I'm used to it now when I'm like the only black person in a room for esports, but it still sucks. It's still weird. Like I've been doing this shit since 2014 and it hasn't really changed.
Yeah, I was gonna say too, like especially on the point, because that was actually my first Evo was 2019, right? And I was expecting, just as you, Amanda, like same thing, like okay, like this is obviously the more predominantly black, you know, esport. Like I'm gonna see more black, you know, esport journalists in this space. It was only me and you, Amanda. Straight up. Yeah. And this is like the biggest fighting game event ever, with the most black, brown, you know, most diverse cast of actual professional players, only 2 reporters of color. And it's just like,
yep.
You can't.
And the biggest downside to stuff like that is that imagine how much nuance and how many other stories, especially as it pertains to Evo, don't get told because those writers just don't have it. And that's not a personal knock against any writer of any other creed or color. That has nothing to do with it. But you can't expect somebody from, you know, the United States to write about the Cuban experience. Yeah. It's just stupid. It doesn't make sense. And so when we're talking about black esports athletes or Latino esports athletes, or we're talking about you know, LGBTQIA esports athletes, okay, you need those writers to write about that experience, because if you don't, you're getting half the story. You will permanently be getting half the story. And I'm not saying that doesn't mean that a white writer can't write about a black esports athlete. That's not what I'm saying. But you can't go, you know, Riot is what, 10 years not deep into their professional league scene, and I've seen maybe all of one, in my memory, one profile on Afro Moon and his experience as a black esports athlete. One. And how long has he been in it? What, 8 seasons? 8 now? Something crazy like that? Like, I'm sorry. It makes, in my opinion, that doesn't make sense as a journalist, and it also doesn't make sense to me. If I was a you know, league organizer, I mean, the NBA does a great job at highlighting the people that are in that league, whether they be, you know, black, whether they be white, whether they, I mean, listen, we love Dirk Nowitzki. We learned all about Dirk being from Germany. We learned all about it. His whole rookie season. Every time you talked about it, he from Germany. So
yeah, you know, unfortunately that is all the time we have for tonight, and I really want to thank all of my guests, because this is not, you know, the easiest thing to talk about. We made it look easy, but you know, we're all people, whether it's Nick behind pen and paper or I guess keyboard, because you know, Zoomers, whatever.
Yeah, I still use pen and
Or
pad.
you know, me, Brandon, and Norris, you know, behind the like either in front or behind the camera. But it's not. This was not easy. Like putting this show together wasn't easy. Getting like these topics are not easy. I've had individual conversations with all of my guests about just how hard it's been, especially after last summer. So, you know, definitely want to give everybody their flowers for, you know, holding the space to talk about this today. You know, we're going to go down the line, tell everybody your Twitter, and then we're going to be out because we've run out of 28 days. So, Nick, where can they find you on Twitter?
You guys can find me at @AsherIsHere_ on Twitter. You'll see my leak writing. I used to do a lot more interviews. I'm tailoring a lot more towards a lot more feature writing and storytelling. Also a little bit of anime writing on there for Crunchyroll. So you might see that as well. Also a decent amount of like shit posting. To LCS Takes, I do a talk show called Perfect Execution where we talk about LCS. We bring on players, coaches, everyone that you could possibly think of in the scene, and we interview them, make them do really stupid stuff on our show.
Norris?
You can find me at Great Laker Nora on basically every social media. That's Great Laker NORI. And also, if you want to listen to my show, Checkpoint Daily, wherever you have your podcasts, and Checkpoint on Campus, where we talk all about college esports as well, and that is also a podcast and YouTube product.
Brandon, where can we find you on Twitter?
You can find me at WriteWellAlways. Unfortunately, I haven't been doing a lot of writing recently. I've been transitioned to kind of doing more of being like an editor at Juked, which I'm going to be eventually transitioning to do more social media stuff with 1337. So, but I mean, if you look around for anything Brandon Brathwaite, you'll probably find some esports, little esports writing here and there. So.
And I'm Amanda T.N. Stevens, your magical unicorn, not Negro. You can find me there on Twitter, where I talk about diversity, inclusion, making white people uncomfortable, and occasionally I talk about this esports thing, but mostly I just like shit post about anime, comic books, and being black and trans. Thank you everybody for joining us. We ran out of 28 days in the month, so you know we're gonna have to do this a little bit more often, a little bit more frequently. But until next time, remember that we're black always.